An unearthly hello to our fellow horror enthusiasts. Welcome to the very first episode of the Writers of Horror podcast. My name is Daniel Willcocks. I will be one of your hosts of the Writers of Horror podcast. And joining me today to help kick things off is fellow co-host Julie Hiner. Hey Julie, how's it going?
Fantastic. Really excited to be here, Daniel.
I am very, very excited for this project. So this episode itself is just basically going to lay out exactly what the Writers of Horror podcast is, what we're doing, why this has all come to being. And with that, we've got a couple of short prompts. So I guess we should probably start with, the big question. What the hell is Writers of Horror, Julie?
Well, in my mind, and I believe that Daniel and I, and we have two other hosts of the group,
Yes.
Daisy and Steve, I think the four of us, we're starting this as a community, a place for horror creatives, whether you write scripts or books or short stories or art or whatever you do. Horror creators can come together and we can support each other in what we are trying to do with our creativity. We can ask questions to each other. We can share all kinds of things that maybe we've done or we know about. And I mean, really, it's also a place to connect.
Yes.
And to really enjoy our love of horror with each other.
Yeah, I think the seeds of this community really came from, I can't remember when it was that I started it, but it was the writers of... oh my God, what was it called? Horror Writers Collaborative that we had on Facebook. And it was
Yes.
one of these throwaway groups that, I was desperate to meet more horror authors, really, and to kind of particularly to find authors as opposed to readers. And there are thousands of reader groups for horror and things. And that group started to grow. And then obviously me and yourself have worked on a few different books and projects over the years. And, we got quite tight in the horror scene. So brought you into the Horror Writers Collaborative, and that group ended up growing to sort of 1,000 odd people. But one of the things that we thought that group was missing was really that kind of, like you say, the community element. It wasn't as engaged as we'd like it to be. So from that, Writers of Horror was kind of born and is now at its core a community. We have a Discord, which is at the minute completely free to join for people that want to jump in early access. And over there, we talk all things horror. We talk about writing, we talk about books, films, inspirations. We help each other with story. And it's a growing group. So from that, it kind of seemed logical to then birth a podcast and to, bring all of the knowledge that we're going to be gaining over the next few months into the heart of the horror community. So that's kind of where this podcast come from. So what are we going to be doing with this podcast, Julie? How's it going to look over the next year or so?
Well, just to kind of pull along what you said is when we were working on the horror collaborative on the Facebook platform, we loved it. The lacking component for us, as you already said, was the connection and the interaction. And we actually did have a number of authors we wanted to interview, and we did do one or two of those. For me, what was lacking is that we did that live interview and it was really great. The guests were interesting and we put a lot of effort into coming up with what to ask them and what to talk about. And then unfortunately on that platform, it just feels like it gets lost. So what I'm really excited about with this podcast is to seek out those authors that are interesting, different, pushing the limits of horror, doing things that we absolutely love and we want to learn from these people, but also we are going to strive to put together on the Writers of Horror website a dashboard. So if you are a subscriber when we get there, and even now, if you join while we have it open for free, you can at any time go back and watch these deep dive interviews that we've done with these fascinating authors and other types of horror creators. So you don't just miss it and it's gone and it's lost in the abyss of the internet.
Oh, yes.
Is that we're going to have this great set of resources for people that are part of this to go back and watch and rewatch and learn. And so I'm really excited to interview some of the authors I've been following for years, and they're doing things that just really fascinate me or I find interesting, and I think we can all learn from.
Yeah, and they were fantastic interviews on the Facebook. I mean, we had Michelle River from Erie River Publishing talking about, how she went from nothing to building up this sort of powerhouse in independent publishing. You had Ross Jeffrey on there, who you chatted about, Bram Stoker award-winning author of Only the Stains Remain and a few others that are slipping my mind right now. So we're not talking about we're talking about some pretty decent authors in the horror space, sharing some of the things they know, being very generous with their time. And so, yeah, this is an extension of that. The podcast itself, we're going to be airing one episode every month, at least to begin with. Because as you've alluded to, Julie, we're very early in the stages of Writers of Horror at the minute, and this is definitely a resource that we want to grow. We want to really sort of shape it around the community and try and really work out what it is the horror writers want, need, what they're searching for. Over time, we'll grow it to, you know, a resource in which it's got sort of educational features, potentially some courses and all that kind of stuff, and just grow it into a bit of a, I don't know what the word is, but just like a multifaceted tool for authors.
Yeah, well, and a place for us all to up our game, because honestly, I've been doing this for a number of years now. And I feel like, yes, I've learned some things, but there's always so much more to learn. And for me, I feel like it will be a focused place where I can find the tools and resources that I need. Because when you go out there and you start looking, there's so much stuff. It's really easy to get overwhelmed. And I think we have a solid group, and we'll continue to grow this. And people will bring things that they've seen that maybe you didn't see. And now there's this dedicated area to find these gems. And it just, you know, helps to focus the sea of resources that are out there. You know,
Yeah.
and yeah, the connection, the building of a community. Already we've had members join, and before the holidays, there was one lady specifically interested in story feedback. So a few of us jumped on a channel that we have dedicated to that, and we swapped some stories, and it was such a safe place. Because the worst thing is to ask for feedback and then people say, oh yeah, it's good. But you want to grow, you want to do better. And this was such a safe place for us to say, well, this is what I thought worked. And these are some things that I would work on. And here are some ideas. And it was so constructive and so supportive. And that is the flair that we are doing this in, is constructive and supportive to help each other grow.
100%.
So far, it's, even though it's still small, I've been absolutely loving that aspect of it.
Oh yeah, it's really, really rewarding. But I'm going to put you a bit on the spot and just basically say, like, we've not really introduced who the hell we are. So, Julie Hiner,
Yeah.
who the devil are you?
I'm fantastic. So I've done a lot of growing over the last few years, and I have been in some of Daniel's other groups, and I've learned so much. What I do is I write heavy metal horror. So I actually completely fuse music, both rock and metal, a lot in the 80s and 90s, but all eras, with my storytelling. So the era and the music of that time is completely fused with the storyline and the characters. And that's primarily what I do. So I do write horror with a crime feel, and some of it just is pure horror without anything to do with crime. And I'm focused on that space, and that is working for me. It's a very creative outlet for me, and I am learning different things about how to be an author in terms of an author business. I've picked up a lot of stuff, and a lot of what I've learned over the years has sincerely been from me asking other people and getting help. So this is such an exciting time for me to be able to start sharing some of the things I've learned and continue to learn from the other people that join the group.
And has any of your work ever been, I don't know, award nominated at all? Just
Yes, I am really happy to say I've really struggled, and I think a lot of people relate to this, with confidence and voice. And this last year has been tremendous for me to actually see what others see, that I do have a clear theme, I have a clear voice. And so I did put myself out there, and I applied for a Kindle Book Award with my first novel in my core series. And I was actually over the moon, because first, it got into the finalists for horror suspense category and for best cover. And then it got into, or sorry, the semi-finalists. Then it actually did get into the finalist for horror suspense, and they only picked 5. And what was really exciting for me is that they had actually read the entire manuscript in order to take it from the semi-finals to the finals. So I did not win, but I was so excited that experienced people had read this manuscript and validated for me that, Julie, this is decent writing, it's a good story, it's interesting. And so it kind of threw me into this, okay, I need to stop telling myself it isn't good enough, and I need to continue. And I am continuing, and I am growing, and I just have a little bit more confidence now to share the books and to continue to apply for different awards and different types of things. So thank you for asking. It's been quite a year for me.
I love that, like, out of all of the things, it's that kind of stuff that gets missed off, because I like, there's a weird thing about when you get like nominated or you win anything, that it's almost like, oh, I don't really want to mention this because it kind of feels like I'm bragging, but then at the same time, like, it's really cool. But, and like, there's this whole like mindset feature to what it is to be an author, which is obviously a lot of like the
Yeah.
stuff that I, teach and work on and have over the years. But it's kind of just to extend on that, I guess. So for myself, I'm Daniel Willcocks. I am an international best-selling author of horror. I am one of the founders of the Other Stories podcast, which is an award-winning podcast that has. Sorry, that sounded really like daggery the way I said that. It's an award-winning podcast that's had. We've just celebrated 10 million downloads across sort of all different platforms. So it's really rewarding to see like a lot of that work come to fruition. And although I've kind of stepped back a lot from the production, like Luke and Carl and all the guys over at Hawk and Cleaver are doing like incredible stuff. And yeah, I'm also an author coach over at activatedauthors.com. I started all my writing business in sort of 2015. I released a small novella called Sins of Smoke that went very quickly to the top of the Amazon horror charts over the Halloween period, which was bizarre considering I started my journey by just wanting to put out a book. Like, I had no idea about this sort of game of publishing and self-publishing and all of the business that goes with it. It was literally a case of, I wanted to write a good story. I wanted to put something out there. I put out a good story, it seems, and it did well. And kind of everything snowballed from that. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go full time with my writing in 2019. And I've kind of been full time ever since. So I'm coming on like nearly 4 years now, which is kind of insane for me. But I love horror. Horror, like, I've been around the houses with different genres. Horror is what I always return back to. I've worked on a few anthologies, one with Julie where we've kind of combined lots of different horror authors and kind of championed them. At the minute, I'm very focused. I say focused. I'm very what's the word? Do you know those little penny machines where you put a penny in, it spins round and round and round and drops into the thing? I'm kind of like halfway through that spiral, going down a bit of a rabbit hole of cosmic horror. And I'm very deep into a lot of sort of reading on Lovecraft and stuff at the minute, and Lovecraftian work. So that at the minute is kind of my bag. But I love teaching. I love helping other authors excel, which is why I founded activatedauthors.com. And so it seemed only right, really, that Writers of Horror spring from that as a bit of an extension, as a way to champion horror authors, because as you kind of mentioned, like, it does feel in some ways like we're being underserved, especially when it comes to the actual publishing side of things. So there we go. This is the Writers of Horror podcast, and that's kind of who we are. Who are some of the people we are either getting on the show or would love to see on the show?
Well, our first guest in February will be an author I've been following for quite some time, Chad Lutzke. And he's actually got a new book coming out in January. And I was honored to be able to read it ahead of time. He was looking for some readers and, of course, loved it just like I've loved everything else. He, in my mind, does really push, excuse me, that what his content is really pushing the interesting and the creepy. So I'm really excited about that. We also have lined up a publishing company called The Seventh Terrace. They are both accomplished authors and they run this publishing company. And what's interesting is they do have a presence like on the horror scene internationally, and some of what they published has been nominated for awards. And so they take on some really big authors, and they're just a very multi-talented group. And we're also looking at, we've got a very well-known script film writer lined up in the future. We're working that out as well. And and then there's another author, Con Lavery, and if you haven't heard of him, definitely you will on this show. And I think he's very interesting because he's a graphic designer by day and a writer by night, or whatever, he splits his time. But his art and his graphic art is just absolutely part of all his books, whether it be the covers or the art inside. And he actually does have music scores that go with some of his books that he's either done himself or worked with other musicians to do. So, I mean, we just have this wide variety of talent out there. You should tell us maybe about some of the ones you're thinking of, or if you're there yet, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of still, full transparency, I'm still drafting. Like, I've got a list of people that I'm thinking of approaching, but we're kind of, so as this podcast goes out, each episode is basically going to be either myself or Julie. So, we'll have the odd episode where you see us together. But broadly, these interviews will be led by one or the other. And so with that, it means that, I've got a very short list of people that I'm trying to reach out to. But I've been fortunate enough to have conversations with people like Josh Malaman over the years, JD Barker, both sort of very big heavy hitters in horror. So it'd be cool to get Josh Malaman. I would love to bring back on, because that was an absolute delight to have that conversation with him. But people of that caliber, I mean, people like Mick Garris, who I met at Chillicon early this year, who was one of the writers of Hocus Pocus and does the Postmortem podcast and has done like a few films and stuff with Stephen King and things. Would love to get people like him on. But even down to like the people who are running and dominating indie, like Gemma Amore is a fantastic example. Eric LaRocca, people like that would be great to reach out to. So
yes,
at the minute, watch this space as this list grows and we start to bring these people on. But yeah, I mean, obviously we would love to get the King on. I think if either of us ever did get the King on, we'd probably both sit in that interview together.
I think so. My husband gifts me books for Christmas every year, and he just gave me the fairy tale that was just written.
Oh yes.
And oh my gosh, it was like I spent days just reading this. It was like magical. The cover, the way it was textured, the illustrations inside, he hired 2 illustrators. And I just felt like this kid again, going back in time where I was immersed in this world. It was so magical. I was just like, I haven't read a King for a while, so it was a very good way to spend a few days during the festive season. And it's just, there was something magical about it. So I highly recommend it if you haven't picked that up.
Nice. I might have a few more questions after we've stopped recording.
Yeah,
I mean, just to clarify for people, so as we say, these podcast episodes will come out with guests each and every month. The episodes themselves will be sort of between 20 and 30 minutes long, and those who are part of our Discord community will get the full hour-long interview, all the extra bonus bits, as well as some more nuanced questions about the creative process. So feel free to join us over at Discord. As we say, like as of this recording, it's all totally free. At some point, the community will become a paid service to sign up to help horror authors and further introduce what we're trying to do. I will also add as well, the Writers of Horror let me try that again. I will also say that Writers of Horror is a what they call a community interest company, which basically means it's a charity. So this has been built very specifically in a way that like anything that comes in, anything that we do, it really is going back to reinvest in the development of horror authors and to give you guys everything that you need. So stick with us. We've got some really cool things on the horizon.
Jump in now.
Because
like Daniel said, it's you get to try this out, and we will have some really cool interviews coming up. And if you join now, you'll get to see the deep dive portion of those interviews and just test us out a little as a community. So jump in now.
Yeah, if you don't like it, you can bugger off. There's no like obligation or worries. Where can people find out more about us? Where can people find us?
Well, I mean, of course, we'll provide the Writers of Horror website. You can find me personally at killersanddemons.com. All the information is there. Come on by for some good old 80s metal and a toxic cocktail of horror. Who wouldn't want that, right?
I will say as well, like having watched your journey over the last few years and seeing you building Killers and Demons and all the stuff that you're doing, like it really is like incredible to see how it's all springing together, and just like the brand and the imagery and everything. Like it's really nice to see you find yourself in your genre.
Thank you.
Very welcome. And for me, you can find all that I'm doing over I'm on all socials pretty much at Willcocks, which is WILLCOCKS, author. And yeah, for everything Writers of Horror, you can go to writersofhorror.org, or you can find us on Instagram. At the minute, we'll probably expand that in the future, but for now we're just on Instagram at We Write Horror. So I guess without any further ado, that kind of wraps everything up. But lots of interviews coming your way. If you love us, go and find us over in the Discord community. If you don't worry about it. It's cool. We'll never meet you. It's fine. We're voiceless. But for now, we will say goodbye and see you very, very soon.